Hello everyone, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. In this video, we will be talking about 5G spectrum auction. We will get to know what is meant by this spectrum and how is this auction happening and what is the outcome of this particular spectrum auction which is related to 5G technology. What is the context? You can see here 5G spectrum sale is happening from the Department of Telecommunication. That is, the government is carrying out the 5G spectrum auction, because of which this particular issue is in news. So let's understand, what do you mean by this spectrum? Students, you can see here, this is a diagram which you will be very familiar with. This is the spectrum of electromagnetic waves. So here you can see radio waves, infrared. This is the visible light where we have our VIBGYOR, and this is UV, X-rays and gamma rays. This is in the increasing order of its frequency. Okay, remember this. This is a diagram which we have seen. How is this related to the 5G spectrum auction? If you break this particular spectrum, this is radio waves, we will have this. This is a diagram which shows from 9 kilohertz to 400 gigahertz of spectrum. This is 9 kilohertz and this is 400 gigahertz of spectrum, that is called as radio waves. Here you can see this is the AM radio, okay, where we have frequency modulation, that is FM and AM we have here. This is a broadcast for the TV, and this is the radio's frequency for the cell phones, and this is for the GPS. Here you can see for the GSM, 2G, 3G, and this is an S band for 2 to 4 gigahertz you can have here. In this spectrum where we have cell phones, okay, this is where the spectrum where we have cell phones, this is the spectrum or the airspace. This is the spectrum or the airspace that the government is providing for the private players, which is called as spectrum auction. So in the spectrum auction, government will be privatizing this particular airspace where there will be no interference between the competitors, because of which we all can use our internet, we all can use our radio, we all can use our cell phones seamlessly. So how is this 5G spectrum auction happening? See, we all know that there were 3 contenders for the spectrum this year, that is Jio, Reliance Jio, Bharti Airtel and Vodafone Idea. Along with this, for the 5G spectrum auction of 2022, there was one more player that got added, that was Adani Group. Okay, the Adani Group also started bidding and also won a limited 26 gigahertz spectrum. This was the spectrum that Adani Group targeted, and Adani Group got this spectrum. And we have the 4th player, okay, that is Adani Group in 2022 5G spectrum auction. See, this 5G spectrum auction actually happened for 52 gigahertz of the airspace, and the government expected the revenue of 5.3 lakh crores, but in reality, all government could get was 1.5 lakh crores. Okay, this is the amount of the entire spectrum auction that happened in the year 2022. Recently, it got concluded. So the validity period for the 5G spectrum would be generally 20 years. Okay, what is spectrum auction? You can see here, it's an invisible radio frequency that wireless signal travels over. So the frequency band would be from 20 kilohertz to 400 gigahertz. And this entire spectrum is divided into 3 blocks, that is called as low band, mid and the high band, based on the frequency. Here, I would like to tell you 2 different things. One is the 700 megahertz spectrum that Reliance Jio targeted, and 26 gigahertz spectrum that Adani Group got. So this 700 megahertz spectrum is also called as sub gigahertz spectrum, that is sub 1 gigahertz spectrum. It is invariably called as sub 1 gigahertz spectrum, and this is a spectrum that will have huge territorial reach, which means if at all this signal is used by Jio, then Jio will be able to transmit the signals up to 6 to 7 kilometers. This will be the range of 7 megahertz spectrum. This is the reason why Reliance Jio wanted the signal, and Reliance Jio actually bid a lot for this signal. It concentrated its money in buying 700 megahertz spectrum. Whereas 26 gigahertz spectrum that Adani Group got, Adani Group is actually trying to make a data center using all its resources as of now. So because of which it will be more concentrated, where 26 gigahertz spectrum will be used for high speed internet, and also it will not have the territorial reach. Probably it can go for 2 kilometers would be its territorial reach for the data center that the Adani Group is actually planning for its business. So this 26 gigahertz spectrum will be very crucial. This is what happened. This is when we talk about low, mid and the high band spectrum. This is something that you got to know. The validity of this spectrum that actually government carried out, the auction that government actually carried out, will be valid for 20 years. Okay, how did the auction happen? So there is something called as EMD. This is the money that the telecom companies has to deposit in the form of advance. For example, if you assume when you're planning to shift for a rented house, the advance that the owner demands will be somewhere between 6 to 8 months of rent. Okay, this will be somewhere, if the rent is 10,000, then probably the owner will ask the advance ranging from 50,000 to 80,000. This is how usually happens. Same way, if the EMD amount is 14,000 crores, then the telecom department or the government will assume that this particular advance amount, then the actual spectrum bid that would be happening from the side of Reliance Jio would be somewhere around 5 to 6 times of the EMD amount. Okay, if the Reliance is having 14,000 as its advance, that is EMD, then it would be bidding somewhere around 14,000 into 5. Okay, 60,000 crores. It's an average. On an average, Jio would be bidding for 60,000 crore rupees. This would be the projection. Bharti Airtel, we can see 5,500 crores. Vodafone Idea had an advance of 2,200 crores, and Adani Group 100 crores. What happens if the 5G rollout happens? 5G rollout is actually planning, the government is actually planning to have 5G rollout by the end of, or by the mid of 2023. By mid 2023, we will have 5G happening. So 5G would be more faster, smarter and more reliable interconnection, and 5G can support up to 1,000 devices per meter, expected to be rolled out by 2023, mid or the end of 2023. See, even if the 5G rolls out, 5G is expected to create digital divide because only 7% of Indian population as of now, the smartphone users, 7% of the smartphone users have the devices that can actually support 5G. So in the absence of the devices which can help, which can support 5G, so 5G is expected to have some kind of digital divide, and we would expect it to concentrate among the urban classes, and we need more time for 5G network to penetrate into the rural areas. So what happened with respect to 2022 spectrum auction? You can see here, Reliance Jio, as expected, was the largest bidder, and it secured 48% of the entire spectrum that was reserved for bidding. So this year you can say around 50% of the spectrum that was allowed for the bidding was taken over by Reliance Jio, and Reliance Jio invested a huge amount, that is 88,000 crores into the spectrum auction. So Bharti Airtel, second place, 39% of the spectrum. Vodafone Idea is expected, because the Vodafone Idea is actually going through a financial crunch, 12% of the spectrum and invested 19,000 crores. But the last but not the least player, Adani Group, concentrated all its efforts in buying 26,000 gigahertz spectrum, and it was successful. Okay, it was very successful. So these are the 4 players, and this is how the spectrum auction actually went out. And all this projects somewhere around 1.54 lakh crores, but the government had expected somewhere around 3.8 or 3.9 lakh crores. Okay, this is about the spectrum auction of 2022. For more such enriching content, please subscribe to Legacy IAS Academy. Have a nice day. Thank you.